Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Churchill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I would like to begin by expressing how honoured I am to be the newly appointed critic for the status of women for the NDP. Yay. It is an honour to follow in the footsteps such as my colleague, la députée de Gatineau, the MP for Nanaimo Cowichan, the MP for London Fanshawe, Judy Washali-Chalice, dynamic women such as Dawn Black, Alexa McDonough, Audrey McLaughlin, Margaret Mitchell, and Rosemary Brown, and Grace McGuinness, and so many others. It is an honor to speak out on behalf of our party, the NDP, that has always been at the forefront of fighting for women's rights and gender equality. And in that fight for gender equality as Status of Women critic, I'd like to put out a warning to the Prime Minister that in this House and in fighting for gender equality, I'll be using the F word. Yes, the F word, feminism. The approach that sees and understands well that women and men must be equal. And that women of my generation will be taking that word back to say that we don't want to go back, but we want to move forward. Since 2006, consecutive Conservative governments have rolled back the clock on gender equality. They removed the word equality from the Status of Women mandate. They eliminated the Court Challenges program and pay equity legislation. They've cut advocacy, services, research, and have shown nothing but inaction when it comes to violence against women, and particularly, most notably, violence against Aboriginal women. Every step along the way, they have sought to silence women's voices. And every step along the way, they've sought to destroy the foundations of our work to achieve gender equality. But perhaps the most pointed attack on women has been in the area of reproductive rights. And here we are again today, debating a Conservative motion that essentially reopens the debate on a woman's right to choose. The reality is that the issue of abortion was settled in 1988. In 1988, the Supreme Court of Canada struck down Canada's abortion law, ruling that it was unconstitutional. The justices found that the law violated Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms because it infringed on a woman's right to life, liberty, and security of person. That was 1988, almost 25 years ago, a generation ago. And this decision came about after years of work from women who from across the country sent the message that women ought to have the right to choose, that women ought to have the right to decide their future, that women ought to have the ability to define their destiny. And that fight also took place in the House of Commons. Our leader in 1987, Audrey McLaughlin, spoke out clearly, saying that, quote, limiting the right to the personal care and control of one's body is a violation of a most basic fundamental right, that of reproductive choice. As Ms. McLaughlin and others have pointed out, abortions, if they are not performed legally in medical facilities under the direction of a physician, will happen in much less favorable circumstances. As ugly as it may seem, women must not be forced to return to those ugly circumstances of using coat hangers, vacuum cleaners, or putting themselves in the hands of quacks. It's an ugly reality, Ms. McLaughlin said, but it is a reality. There were caravans, protests, lobby meetings, speeches, and debates. And the issue was settled in 1988. When Canadians have been asked time and time again, a majority have supported a woman's right to choose. And here we are, 2012, seeing this government reopen the debate on abortion. And they haven't been truthful about it either. Time and time again, the Prime Minister and members of his party have said that they will not reopen the abortion debate. But I quote, "As long as I am Prime Minister, we are not opening the abortion debate," Prime Minister declared. The government will not bring forward any such legislation, and any such legislation that is brought forward will be defeated as long as I am Prime Minister. This comes from an article in the Globe and Mail from Wednesday, December 21st, 2011. An article around that same time quoted the Prime Minister as saying, "As long as I'm Prime Minister, we are not reopening the abortion debate." This is the Conservative Party's Trojan horse agenda. During an election, and even here in the House of Commons, they tell Canadians one thing, and then they win government, and now a majority government, and we see what they truly mean. If the Prime Minister didn't want a woman's right to choose to be debated, we wouldn't be here tonight. What's interesting is that they felt the need to tell Canadians something else. They felt the need to tell Canadians something else so that these same Canadians would vote for them. They waited to win a majority and then to uncover their hidden agenda. I believe that the Conservatives have some lessons to learn from their sister party in Alberta, the Wild Rose Party, who, despite predictions that it would win a majority government, ended up with no more than a few seats. Why? Because they scared people. They talked about conscience rights and turning the clock back on the rights of women, same-sex rights, and so on. And the more people heard from them, the more they turned away. Interestingly, a number of Conservative MPs very openly showed serious support for the Wild Rose Party. Maybe they can watch closely enough to learn a lesson. Canadians will not stand for a veiled attempt to have our rights turned back. Women will not stand for a rolling back of the clock on women's rights. My generation will not stand to go backward. Yesterday I was inspired by the so many young women that organized and came together in front of the House of Commons, in front of Parliament, to speak out, to stand up for our right to choose. Many of these young women, some of them weren't even around in 1988, but certainly many of these young women, like me, were very young when this decision was made. We know from history books the women and men who fought hard to have a woman's right to choose respected. We've read in our history books how Canada, slowly, through the work of so many people outside and inside Parliament, became a model for the world for gender equality. And we've all known that there's much further than that we have to go. But the reality is that under this government, we're only going back. Et j'aimerais partager le message comme une jeune femme d'une génération qui doit lutter pour pouvoir retourner au droit et aussi à la situation que peut-être on pourrait avoir dans un pays comme le Canada et dans le futur. On a vu un gouvernement qui systématiquement sert à retourner en termes de son approche, d'une approche canadienne envers les droits des femmes, les droits des minorités, les droits des peuples autochtones. Et la discussion ce soir, c'est une discussion qu'il faut avoir pour pouvoir dire que oui, on s'oppose. On s'oppose à un agenda qui sert à retourner les femmes canadiennes et les Canadiens dans un temps beaucoup plus en arrière. Mais je trouve de l'espoir et ça me donne beaucoup de renforcement de savoir qu'on fait partie d'un parti, le Parti néo-démocrate, qui se tient uni dans cette Chambre, qui se tient uni en disant qu'on oppose la motion M-312, qu'on oppose le réouvrement du débat sur l'avortement et qu'on se tient debout en disant qu'il faut aller de l'avant en tant que les droits des femmes et l'égalité de sexe. So I have a message for the Prime Minister and his party on behalf of our caucus. A message on behalf of women and men from across the country. My message is that this issue has been decided. A woman's right to reproductive choice is a human right. And in Canada, in 2012, a woman's right to choose is not up for negotiation.
La période prévue peut maintenant